Hello and welcome to the Draft Academy Premier League podcast, where we talk all things Premier League draft, all in the hopes of helping you get your hands on some Premier League glory of your own. I'm Ryan Lieberthal, joined by Phil Berilovitz and Jared Angel. What's happening, lads?
How's it, Liebs?
What's happening? Getting excited for draft season.
Getting very, very excited. We're just over a month away. It's never too early to start preparing.
It is getting close. I was
actually thinking of putting a message on the draft group today.
Yeah.
Of already trying to secure a time for our live draft.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea, seeing as how long it takes us to bloody organise a good draft.
Yeah.
I know, but you know these guys trying to ask them something 5 weeks in advance.
Yeah, we'll be cramming to get that time the day before we start drafting, probably, as usual.
Okay, so today we are going to be looking at draft strategies, right? The best way to approach your draft, to build the best possible team you can put together, putting all those 7 or so years of draft experience to some use, hopefully, right? Hopefully get your hands on some cash money, some trophies, some bragging rights. In our league, we play for all 3. And Fulzo, you're our current champion. Which one was the sweetest to get your hands on?
It was the cash.
Cash.
With the baby, it was definitely very helpful. Lots of nappies and baby cream were bought with that cash.
100% feel you there, bro.
Yeah.
Ange, interesting question for you before we dive into it. This time of year, most of our conversations are dominated by draft research, like who ranks where, who sits where. Bit of a down season in draft and fantasy last year. Quite difficult to find consistent performers. Case in point, the 3rd top scoring striker was Timo Pukki with 11 goals and 3 assists. Right? How is that affecting how you're ranking players going into this year?
Look, I think we've also got to wait to see which players come out and if they're put as midfielders or forwards. Because I think if you just look at your Pukki conversation, I mean, the fact that Pukki's 3rd top, it just shows a lot of players that probably should be forwards went forwards. So are the platforms going to do any adjustments to that this season? Some
maybe
of the new guys, maybe Sonny, some of the new guys coming in, are they forwards? Are they midfielders? You know, so I guess we'll have to see that. I don't know. When does that normally happen, position-wise?
I would expect the platforms to launch in the next week or so.
Yeah.
In the next week or so, I'd expect the platforms to be up. So, yeah, very interesting. We're going to have to see where they decide to rank players. Phil, as our current champ, let's pick your brain first. What's your number 1 draft strategy going into this upcoming season?
So it's a difficult one, at Leaves, because I'll be honest, I've actually tried 3 separate strategies 3 years in a row. I've tried a couple strategies. 2 of them did not pay off.
Let's use the one that you won off of.
Yeah,
Right?
let's use last season.
Yeah, let me tell you about the one that I tried last season. So, firstly, it is a lot of luck that comes your way. It's where you're going in the draft. It's what number you're picking. It's what has been taken. So many things matter. But to be honest with you, my strategy going into this year was always go for a big midfielder. Try get a premium midfielder. I mean, you get the bonus points, you get clean sheet points, get more points for a goal with the midfielder. And I mean, usually my number 1 goal is to go for a 20-goal striker. I've always believed in getting a 20-goal striker, but this year I tried something different. I went for that big midfielder because of the reasons I explained, and it did work out. I did get Salah. I was very lucky to grab Salah in the 3rd spot, which I did not expect to happen. Like, I really did not see that happening. And I mean, a player like that will win you games by himself. There's no doubt about it. But the aim after that was also to pick another big midfielder. After that was to go another 2 big hitting midfielders. I ended up getting Mahrez as my 2nd pick, which ended. I mean, Pep Roulette is difficult. It's always tough when you've got Pep Roulette out there. But it did work out. The 2 big midfielders was my number 1 strategy, and then go for a big striker. And I did pick up Aubameyang as my 3rd pick, which, I mean, it wasn't a bad
goals,
pick. He got me some goals. And but then he left halfway through the season. But yeah, so the aim was, to be honest, going in was 2 big midfielders and a big goal scorer. That was the aim going into the draft, and it worked out pretty well.
What did the rest of your strike force look like? Because, like, for me, one of the issues is that I agree with you. If you're stuck between a midfielder and a forward, always go for the midfielder for the reasons that you mentioned. But there are less forwards available. I mean, like Ange said, we've got to see who gets moved around this season. but there are less forwards available. So who else did you manage to draft up front, if you remember?
So what I went for was, my aim was to get 2 starting strikers. I wanted to get, with Aubameyang, I was hoping, whether it was even a lower team or a lower profile side, I wanted to get a starting striker, even if they got me 5 to 10 goals. I just wanted someone in there. And I managed to get Ivan Toney from Brentford.
Yeah, that was a good pick.
And Callum Wilson from Newcastle. So I was happy with my strike force. It ended up really quite solid. But like you say, premium strikers there's not a lot of them out there. So it's interesting. Like, do you go for one straight away and just make sure you've locked one down? I mean, back in the day, I was a fan of getting Kun Aguero as soon as possible. That was my number one going in 4 years running. And like I say, if you're relying heavily, I mean, if they come right, there's nothing better than a 25-goal striker, because you know that they're going to get you points all the time. But so that was my thinking. Try to get a starting striker instead of maybe getting a Jesus, where he might come on, get some goals for a premium team like Man City. I decided to go for a starting striker like Ivan Toney, who would start almost every game. And he might not get as many goals, but he's going to get me those 2 guaranteed points every game, and maybe the odd goal and assist. So that was my thinking with my alternative strikers. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Ange, what you got for us?
My strategy is always to pray I get first pick. And that just makes things a bit easier.
And then you'll pick up Kane and trade him later on.
Yes, I will. So, look, my first 2 drafts, like you said, we've been doing this for around 7 years now. I try to have strategies, and you plan all these things out, and you don't know what number you're going to pick, and then you learn what number you're going to pick, and now that whole strategy changes. And then, especially if you're in the latter, let's say the 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s picking order, there's that small gap of 5 to 7 where if one of your players gets picked, then it's going to change everything, so. But if I just think of my last 2 seasons, within my first 2 picks, I've had a wing back, not something Phil didn't even mention, and that changed because that wasn't my initial intention, but Trent worked out to be a better pick than anyone else for me personally in that time.
No, 100%. If you look at Trent, if you take clean sheets as goal contributions, as well as points contributions as well, he was the 3rd overall points contributor.
Yeah.
Right? If you combine his goals, his assists, and clean sheets, he would have chipped in around 31 times last season.
Sure. So like I say, it ended up being a good pick. But if I was picking 3rd or 4th, I don't think that would have been my first pick.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that speaks to one of my main draft strategies, is that when I'm looking to pick my players, I've messed around with a few different positions, and I know we all have, right? Like the first year we drafted, everyone went for the building the spine of your team strategies, right? Where in the first 4 rounds, you try to get a striker, a midfielder, a defender, and a goalkeeper, right? The one season I actually played around with an NFL strategy, didn't go well at all, right? But that was... In NFL, you only draft running backs and wide receivers in your first 5 or 6 rounds. Yeah. So I thought, same logic. Only strikers and midfielders in the first 5 rounds. I'm not even going to look elsewhere, right? Which, to your point, means that there's no Cancelos, there's no Trents, there's no Robbos. Didn't work out well, right? My number one strategy is next best player available, right? Okay. It sounds obvious, right? But when you're in those 3rd, 4th, 5th round, you start to feel the pressure of thinking, I need a defender. I need a this. I need a that. Yeah. But you just got to remember, what you're playing for is points overall. Doesn't matter where they're coming from. If a player is available and he's quality, but you haven't picked a defender yet, there's still plenty of defenders to come.
Yeah. What do you do when you got 3, let's say, of even quality players as the next best pick?
Fucking hits and hope, bro. Hits and hope. So my main strategy is definitely, next best player. You go according to the stats.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Who scored most highly season before?
Yeah.
Right. Phil, you got anything else for us there?
No, so also, what you guys were saying earlier, which saying how the game has evolved is, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, a wing back you wouldn't even look at a defender for your first maybe 2 or 3 rounds. Like maybe Trent would come or a wing back you'd look at on your 3rd or 4th round. Where the way the game's evolved now, and wing backs taking free kicks and corners and getting assists and getting so many more goals, they start coming into your thinking in like round 1 and round 2. And just like you said, like the game has changed, and like, but I do agree with you. Like, you got to go for the best player available when it's on you, and like you said, that you're under the gun. It's nerve wracking. Everyone's waiting for you, and you don't want to take the chance of not picking up that premium player and it coming back to you and he's gone. You can regret that for months later, seeing someone pick up that player and they getting the returns, and you're like, I had the chance to pick up that guy and I let him go.
Yeah.
It kills you. Yeah, it can kill you.
But I mean, what that speaks to is research. You've got to do the research beforehand. Right, that is absolutely key to have a good idea of like where you want to pick. Like, remember someone in our draft last year panicked, didn't pick because he hadn't done the research.
Yeah.
Got quite lucky with a Bernardo Silva and a bit of a purple patch season of his career. But you got to do that research, right? Something I want to.
Vital.
Yeah.
Before we move on from there, just on the strategy side, just maybe a question to both of you. With the new Premier League rules of 5 subs, does that change your strategy in early rounds?
In early rounds, sure.
If I can ask it in a different way, maybe a player you would have picked later because he would have played less, but now the fact that a manager like, let's use Pep as an example, can make those 5 subs and that player may get more game time, are there players you would, from a strategy point of view, bring earlier? Would that still be the same for you?
I actually, just to answer your question, I actually think maybe the opposite. I think someone like a Foden or like a Man City midfielder like a Jack Grealish or someone like you said with Pep Roulette, I might have, with 3 subs, seen Foden or Jack Grealish as a decent second round pick because, like, they're going to get the returns. They always do. They come with the goal and assist because there's so many goals being scored for Man City.
Less minutes.
Now, are they going to be paying maybe less than 60 minutes because you want to keep the guys fresh? You got so many competitions you're playing in. Are these guys even going to be playing 60 minutes and getting you those? It's a difficult one. It's a good question. I'd say that I'm going to stick to how I was picking before, but it's interesting how it could change the thinking, like especially in the later rounds.
I don't think it would change my strategy because I was quite similar to you, Phil. Like I've always avoided players like Jesus. You go for the nailed-on players as much as possible, and I think that's even more important now than before, right? And I'd actually say that looks like Sterling's probably going to be moving on from City, but he'd probably drop out of the first round for the first time since we've been drafting anyway, right? I wouldn't see.
He was actually my second round pick.
Oh, was he your second round pick?
I picked 10th, and so he was basically the 11th pick for our draft last round.
Okay, I mean he would have dropped even further this year, I'd imagine, if he was still there.
At City, yeah. I think so too. Where now at Chelsea, he's probably going to start more games, get more minutes, and maybe becomes a bit of a higher pick.
Yeah, definitely. Something I think is super important to do, right, is I touched on it earlier when we were looking at Trent, but you can't just look at goals, you can't just look at assists, you can't just not consider clean sheets in the whole mix, right? And I think there's a few interesting examples to look at here, right? So if you look at Ronaldo, outscored Kane last season. Ronaldo got 18 goals, Kane got 17 goals, okay? But because of his age, he just got stuck up front and his assist return was nowhere, right? So you got 3 assists, 18 goals, whereas Kane managed to bang in 17 goals and 11 assists, right? And when you're looking at your players and where to rank them, you've got to look at the whole picture, right? Yes, one player might score more goals than another player, but what's the overall contribution going to be, right? Another interesting way to look at this, and there's 2 defenders I want to look at here, which I think really helps you rank where to start looking at players. And this is something interesting I want to ask you guys after this, is when we bring clean sheets into account, okay? If you look at Van Dijk's season last season, he picked up 21 clean sheets, which is insane, right? Yeah. With 3 goals and 3 assists, which means that's 27 points returns. That's him contributing to a team almost every single week.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be well up there, right? At the same token, take someone like Aaron Cresswell, for example. 2 goals, 4 assists, but West Ham only kept 8 clean sheets.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're only expecting a West Ham to keep those 8 clean sheets, how highly do you then value the potential assists that he brings into your team, right? So what I want to ask you guys is, once we've taken out the Cancelos and the Robos and the Trents, where do you then start to actually put a premium on wingbacks in your draft?
Look, I think the names you just mentioned are, in my opinion, more than likely all second-round picks.
You don't think Trent goes round 1 this year? I think I would. I could
Conditional.
I think I could even take Trent at like number 6.
I mean, he was the third highest point scorer this season. I mean, sure, I think he's got to go first round.
Yeah, look, I would imagine you're right, first-round player. Whether it's a 6th place, it's preference and what happened before there and what's kind of left. Who else is potentially coming in. I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but this is the first time we've actually had a backup for Trent. So I don't know how that affects his game time, where he didn't get too much break last time. He had to play because there wasn't real cover for him. Liverpool have gone ahead now and signed a backup, nice youngster. Not saying he's going to walk himself into the team, but, just like how we thought Tsimikas and Robinson, I mean, Tsimikas got a lot more football time than most people probably would have expected last season. Yeah. And you may see the same with Trent this season. So that's why I'm saying wingbacks, those specific ones you mentioned, Leibs, second round. The rest for me, when you start talking about 2 goals, 2 assists, 8 clean sheets, there's probably midfielders that are going to get you better points.
So I do agree with you, but I think there's an interesting thing to bring up here, right? And this is this idea of like ceilings versus floors, right? Like how high is the player's ceiling? How low is their floor, right? Because when you take a player like Cresswell, he is on set pieces. Yeah. He's a defender on set pieces, which means in a good season, he could be looking at 8, 9 assists.
Sure. Yeah.
But you also have to consider when you're drafting how low is a potential player's floor, right? Like I think a good example, if you take someone like Tielemans, right? On a really good season, he can get you 10 goals, maybe like 8 goals and like 12 assists. But on an average season where he still plays well because he's a deeper lying midfielder, gets you like 4 goals and 6 assists. Yeah. It's just important to be aware of that as well when you're like picking up your assets.
What's funny, Leibs, like, sorry, Jay, just like you're talking about like the wing back and the centre back discussion, like what do you go for if they're available? And to be honest, like I've just got this thing. I don't know if it's just a draft fancy, but I always target wing backs. I don't know if it's just because of the assists. Like you just imagine they're going to get more assists and they're going to get more return. But like you said, there are the odd centre backs out there. I mean, Van Dijk's a no-brainer. Like if he's available, you grab Van Dijk before any. I mean, maybe Trent's up, like you'll grab Trent first and then Van Dijk. But if there's a few defenders, like there was a Ben Mee and Tokal, those guys who they get the odd goal from set pieces as well. So like you look at also later on stages, you go for those defenders who are decent on set pieces that can get a header from a corner or from a free kick for teams like Burnley or Burnley aren't there anymore, but. Like,
thank God.
Yeah. And it just, but I've always had this thing about go for wingbacks. Like, even if you have 5 wingbacks for lower teams, I don't know why. It's just been a thing that sticks.
Can I tell you what's interesting about that, though, is centre backs get more game time.
Yeah.
Centre backs get more game time because ideally what you want, especially if you're a lower ranking Premier League team who's not going to be in the FA Cup, in Europe, is you want 2 centre backs that are starting week in, week out, right? So, like for example, on the example I gave, Tyrone Mings outscored Aaron Cresswell last season simply because he played more football.
Those points,
yeah, and that's true. And I mean, even like Rudiger, you look. I mean, he's left, but the guy had a ridiculous goal return this season as a centre back, and you got to look at these things.
Look, I think Chelsea is actually a very good example that you brought up with, in that they have a ton of defenders last season, and it was quite hard to like pinpoint who was going to play. Like Thiago Silva, he was old, but he was getting a lot more game time than probably initially expected. They had that. Then they had a whole injury spurt. But their centre backs were all chipping in when they did play.
Yeah, it was quite. quite easy to read the rotation, which was nice. You know, it wasn't like City where the rotation's impossible to read.
Proper impossible.
Chelsea was quite like, I was quite confident when Chalobah was going to play for me. You could look at the European fixtures. You knew Silva was playing in Champions League. If he played the week before and Champions League, I knew Chalobah was coming on for me that game week. So difficult to know.
Sure.
In that situation, you always try draft 2, right? Always try draft 2, so you got the backup and you know that you've got that Chelsea cover in there.
100%.
Awesome, lads. Anything else you wanna add in before we sign off for week 1?
I mean, I was going to ask a question, but we can do this in a later stage.
Hit us up, Phil.
I was going to ask you, like, when do you draft a keeper? When and what is your thinking on drafting keepers? Do you go for the premium guy if he's available, or do you go for 2 average keepers and rotate? What are your thoughts on with keepers?
Look, I think I would say there's 2 keepers that you can call premium. I mean, like you mentioned, if Van Dijk's keeping 21 clean sheets, that means Alisson did the same.
Yeah.
You know, so to have a goalkeeper who also gets bonuses for saves, going to get you 21 clean sheets in a season. I mean, to me, that's probably closing in on a 3rd round pick kind of player. You know, Ederson maybe bold as well.
Ederson had a decent amount of rotation last season, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so.
Because I know Lloris outscored him. I was quite shocked when I saw this. Lloris was actually the 2nd top goalkeeper in terms of points last season.
Sure.
But look, I agree with Ainge. If you can, look, it depends on who's available around you.
Yeah.
Right? It all depends on who's available around you. You know, if you're looking at Ederson, but, you know, there is a midfielder that plays consistently, that you know, could bring in the assists and the goals. For me personally, I prioritize the midfielder. But the nice thing about picking a premium goalkeeper does mean you don't have to pick again until the 15th round, right? Because if you're picking up an Alisson, you're not going to be picking up any other goalkeepers. You're starting him every single week.
No, the next time you're picking up a goalkeeper is probably your 15th pick.
Yeah, and it's Liverpool's backup goalkeeper.
100%.
Sure.
Whereas if you're picking up a Jordan Pickford, for example, right, then you need someone else. And the problem with that is you're going to rest your goalkeepers who have the worst fixtures.
Yeah.
But if that team actually manages keeping a clean sheet, odds are that goalkeeper's getting a 10-point haul, right? Couple of save points plus the bonuses. And the amount of times I've benched 10 points in my goalkeeper is painful.
I think we've all done it. I'm now kind of have like a conscious effort that I don't want to play that multiple keeper game.
Yeah.
It's have your keeper, your backup keeper, my personal strategy, and that's that.
Yeah. Unless you're really picking goalkeepers late, I think that's the way to go.
Unless I can get Ederson and Alisson, that would be the only time I would play that card.
I think that's going to do us for today, lads.
Cool. Thanks,
Just want to thank both of you lads for joining me in studio today. I want to thank you guys for listening and tuning in. Until next time, this has been the Draft Academy Premier League podcast.